So today's really exciting. I'm sitting down with Jacqui, who helps NDIS businesses get registered. And Jacqui, I guess you've helped many NDIS businesses get registered. What do you see some of the mistakes that they're making in their marketing when they're looking to get their first 10 clients, their first 20 participants? What errors are people making?
Well, a big one is feeling like every person could be a potential customer.
Hmm.
Obviously, they do refine it down to those with an NDIS plan, so they have the
Yep.
funding there, and they consider that they can do many things, which is fantastic because as a registered provider, you as the principal don't need to have all the qualifications uh, yourself. What is it that they do particularly well, and how does that meet the consumer's concerns or issues? So, what I like to say to people is if there's over 550,000 people on the NDIS, would you really want 550,000 people knocking on your door?
And obviously, you don't want 550,000 clients. What do you want?
Well, that is the question that is really the follow-up is if you don't want that many clients, how many do you actually want? And then when people think about it, they say they'd be happy with 20 to start with, like
Hmm.
5, 10, or 20,
Yep.
because that's all they would have capacity to serve.
Yep.
So they're starting to think about of those 550,000, I'm only really wanting, say, 20. 20 would be great. Maybe 50 inquiries that results in 10 to 20 clients would be ideal, particularly in the first 3 months of the business. So then what I do is I ask people, well, what would help the consumer to know that you were the right provider for them? And then what happens is the business owner starts to think of it in terms of the client's perspective. And then they have to make that mental leap from their own perspective to the client's perspective, which is pretty hard because you only really know your own perspective. You don't know other people's perspective. So this is where it's a bit of a mental exercise is to go from what you think, what you all about you and what you're good at to, well, that's nice, but what does the client want?
Yeah, good work. That makes sense. And I guess I met with someone about a week and a half ago who said to me, "Oh, Michael, because I make websites for people in the NDS realm. They're like, make me a website because I'm doing I think it was occupational therapy." I'm like, "Great. What's your niche? Which part of occupational therapy?" And she said, "Well, I'm an NDIS registered provider, so I take everyone." I'm like, "Okay, but that's not going to bring you your ideal client. Who's your ideal client? Because if you don't know, like, if you're going to do, say, occupational therapy, you're going to do that with kids, teenagers, grandmothers, like, and then is it like kids in wheelchairs? Is it grandmothers who've, lost their false teeth? Like, I don't know what their specialty is. So how do I help you market? How do you help people come up with what their specialty is, Jacqui?
So what we do is we go through a whole series of steps. So the first one really is to look at what the strengths, skills, and capacity is of the business owner. And then, so almost like having a bit of a resume to say, well, what are your qualifications? Because just because you want to do something doesn't mean that you'll be able to become registered in that.
Hmm.
So there's a bit of matching to go on there. So it's almost like, what's the possibility? And then from that, how do you then narrow that down to what you can do with your immediate network, your immediate strengths? So, for example, if I was to start an NDIS service myself, I would do the same thing. I would say, well, what am I qualified to do? And what are the requirements of the NDIS? Because some services you don't need a qualification. They just say other profession. And some they're very prescriptive. And it can be about membership of a professional association or having a registration like APRA. So that's to get the breadth of it. And then what we do is we start to narrow it down and say, well, what are you specifically qualified to do? What are you really good at? What do you really enjoy doing? So an example is I worked with a physiotherapist and she said, oh, whenever I go in and talk to disability organisations, I tell them I'm a physio and they just look at me blankly. as if to say, so what? We know lots of physiotherapists, so why should we work with you? They don't say that, but that's the look and the response that she gets. And so what we worked on was finding out from her of all the clients she's ever worked with, which ones give her the most satisfaction and where can she say that she has the best results. And for her, that was people who had suffered a stroke and who were in rehabilitation. And what she could do is actually help them to learn, to relearn those skills they had. And that gave her the most satisfaction and lit her up the most. So when she started going into big disability organisations looking for contract work, she said, I specialise in helping people recovery from a brain injury. And then suddenly their faces lit up and they said, we know exactly who we want you to work with.
That is remarkable. That is absolutely remarkable. So that person went from being someone who would not be considered because she didn't stand out to someone, same person, but because
Yep,
she declared, hold on, this is my specialty, suddenly she's very much in demand. And so I guess
yep.
that's what we want for all of our providers is to know who are they there to serve, who are they not there to serve, to have a very clear distinction between I don't do this, I do this, I do strokes. I don't do, sports injuries. They're not on the NDIS anyway. So I do strokes. And then once you know where you are, then you can start some, like you were talking about, network with, say, support coordinators who are able to connect you with people, or even your website. Her website shouldn't say I do physio for everyone. It should be I do physio specializing in stroke victims or stroke survivors. So I just think that's so exciting, Jacqui, that you're helping people out with that. I guess people who want to get in touch with you or with me, if they need an NDIS website, I'm at athletickoala.com.au. If people want to get started on getting registered as a provider, how do they do that with you, Jacqui?
They can contact me at my website, Nurturing Your NDIS Business, or they can come to me through LinkedIn, through my name, Jacqui Chews. And they can also email me at info@nurturingyour, or just nurturingndis.com.au.
Brilliant. Love your work. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
No worries.